who's basically was a good man turned evil, that the other wizards in the know, or the other elders in the know, continually warn anyone who should approach Saruman to beware his voice.
The white wizard approaches.
To beware his use of language, because that alone will hypnotize you, and no matter how strong you are, you'll be pulled into his web.
Do not let him speak. He will put a spell on us.
I just loved that. I thought that was fantastic, you know, a very powerful image. They did bring it out a little bit in the movie, but this whole idea of the seduction of a man's voice and the power of charisma, you know, and the ability, and of course the media uses this a great deal. And you have, this ties back into the whole concept of the god Mercury. If anyone's familiar with the symbolism of Hermes and Mercury and Thoth, and the earlier version of all of these gods was Ogma from the Celtic tradition, and even Hern being the origin of the word Herm or Hermes. It's all Irish Druidic. Those gods were the gods of language. Those gods were the gods of words. Those gods were the gods of communication, with the understanding that communication by words is a phenomenally powerful and important weapon of both the good and the bad side. Interestingly, Ogma, the Celtic god, his other two traits was strength. They taught symbolically like this. Okay, so Ogma is the god of language, but he's also the god of strength. Yes, because language is strength. Language is a form of power. Man who knows how to manipulate language and words is strong. What was his title, his name? They call him the Honey Mouth. Ogma the Honey Mouth, because, you know, and I guess there's even Scandinavian, I think Loki had the power of that, almost a hypnotic, you know, ability with words.
Art is, like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the Book of Spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman.
When you hear these talismanic words like control, security, stronger America, strength, realize that they're talismanic words. They're being used against you. They're seduction words. They try and get you to accept this because you don't have that. Well, you've been raped of that. The people who are selling you one story here have actually taken away the very things that you needed that were in your psyche to begin with.
I am continuing and I am increasing the search for every possible path to peace.
We maintain our strength in order to deter and defend against aggression, to preserve freedom and peace.
No one, friend or foe, should doubt our desire for peace.
The United States wants peace.
We seek peace. We strive for peace.
I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace.
I respect your idealism. I share your concern for peace. I want peace as much as you do.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Botulinum, VX, sarin, nerve agent.
Iraq
and Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
Terrorism. Cyber attacks.
Nuclear program. Biological weapons.
Cruise missiles. Ballistic missiles.
Chemical and biological weapons.
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
President Bush has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Tony Blair has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Donald Rumsfeld has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Richard Butler has said they do. The United Nations has said they do. The experts have said they do. Iraq says they don't. You can choose who you want to believe.
The sources that have deceived us so constantly don't deserve our trust. And to the extent that we give them our trust, we set ourselves up to be scammed again and again.
There are reports that there is no evidence of a direct link between Baghdad and some of these terrorist organizations.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
I will build new partnerships to defeat the threats of the 21st century. Terrorism and nuclear proliferation, poverty and genocide, climate change and disease. And I will restore our moral standing so that America is once again that last best hope for all who are called to the cause of freedom, who long for lives of peace, and who yearn for a better future.
And this is used endlessly in the media by the drip feed method of just constantly downloading the same idiotic memes that you consciously would think you resist. But if they're repeated for the 10, 20 years and you've been growing up, before you know it, you're a parrot of all of that. You don't even realize it was implanted. That's the whole point. You're not meant to realize that your thinking is not your own. That's the smokescreen I was talking about. You're not meant to know that you're under hypnotism. You're meant to think you're perfectly normal. So they're going to sell you the most irrational, most satanic, most vile, pornographic lies, but they're going to sell it in a capsule that makes you think that you're perfectly spiritual, perfectly adjusted, totally normal. As this continues, as this process continues, the division between the outsider who's really sane and the unsane gets wider and wider and wider. What are people complaining about? That they can't believe the world they're walking around in. Sane people are going, I can't handle it, I can't work, it's terrible, the people are idiots. Yeah, but that didn't happen last year, that didn't happen 2 months ago. You're seeing the symptom, not the cause. You're seeing the symptom of an immensely long, phenomenally detailed and interesting and complex. What was Soviet Russia? You can sum up the whole gig of communist Russia in one sentence. Experiment. Social experimentation. Then you can split hairs as to whether it was a Darwinian experimentation or an Orwellian blah, blah, blah. It's an experiment in how to control human beings who very easily were controlled. Oh my goodness, 33 people are shot dead. Everybody is just tripping over themselves with awe and amazement and anger and frustration. Let me see, what else is going on in the world right now? What else has been going on since 2001? Let me see, what's happening in Iraq or Iran right now? Can we ask a question about that? What was going on during the previous George Bush? Was there a thing called Desert Storm in which millions of people were killed, children were wiped out, incinerated? In Panama, were people not burned to death with lasers and incinerated in their own cars, completely innocent people? Then we have Grenada before that. Grenada. Then you have, where do we stop? How many wars do we need? But your children die. Of course it's horrible. But can we have some context here? Can we have some sanity here? That just because your little pathetic, mediocre lifestyle has not been shaken up by something you don't understand, that's the only violence you think it exists in this world? Somebody has to be wielding, a 38 on your own street, in your own backyard, before you realize that there's such a thing as violence in the world? I'm here to tell you that all of that kind of violence, including the genocide, including the mega death, chew on this, that all of that, all through history, is a tiny aspect of the violence that exists in the world. That's the stuff you can see with your five senses. But as any competent psychologist will tell you, that is a very small, sadly, that is a symptom. That's what that is. That's an outpouring and outletting, a playing out in the world. Obviously helped and assisted by those who would like to have chaos rule in the world. Yes. But where is its roots? You're going to keep studying the, leaf? You're going to keep studying the bloom and not ask where the root is? Or we'll have a wonderful society tomorrow where they'll be able to prune that really easily. And we won't have any of that violence, because in fact we'll have a new world order. The chaos out of control. Everything's in chaos. People killing themselves. And we have a perfect structure now that will always deal with that. But will the root be ever looked at? If the root is not looked at, I don't care what kind of order or system is involved in the world of man that, prunes that or, keeps that nicely culled or caged or whatever. I happen to know that the root is twofold. The root of all of this mayhem, chaos and destruction and immorality is actually a twofold root. The one root is in man's inability to look at his dark emotions, which is a psychological